Okay, it is 7:02 p.m. Central Standard Time. Today is Tuesday, October the 19th, 2021. Welcome to week number 3. Week 3, that means that we're at the halfway point, starting the halfway point. So I, it's funny how um, they give you a survey to do at the week 3, which really just started, but they do give it to you. So I do hope that you'll take time to do those surveys because they let us know things, particularly me, things. And I try to do things to help you guys. For example, you each probably saw the email about the um, first assignment where there's about 7 or 8 of you, I believe it was, that submitted the assignment as either a PowerPoint, either a JPEG, or either as a PDF. I think you will find that after you go back and read the instructions, that it does say Microsoft Word and then in the Dropbox. So it's very important for students to understand um, to follow those steps because we cannot properly grade those items unless they are assignments that are designed for that. I've only had one class out of 3 that I teach that had a PowerPoint, and it's very important. And then um, I got an infographic coming up in my contemporary issues in criminal justice this week, so I'll be reminding those students about that as well. But it's very important. And then the second most important thing is please pay attention to the column that I constantly talk about in the rubric. And don't, the masters. Somebody once asked me, why do I just focus on the masters? I said, think about the question, why am I giving you the instructions that will maximize your grade? Because I believe that 99.999% of the students, and probably could round it up to 100, want an A. However, though, one of the parts that's very important for each of us to understand, and yours truly had to be one of those too, to learn that whatever the instructions required were point number 1 to make sure that the length of the paper was properly, make sure that I understood APA. I shared with you an announcement about the importance of APA. There was a session today, I believe. No, yeah, there was a session today, but that was the advanced one. But there were 2 sessions in a row, and your announcement is still there. So it's very important. Um, if you got to get the basics before you can do the advanced. And I talked to a student just yesterday who's a former student who is actually graduated. She has graduated, and she reached out to me for a recommendation, and she reached out to me for some advice um, before going into her interview for a paralegal position. And we were on the phone for about an hour, a little over an hour, talking. And one of the things that I reminded her of is that in her writings, what drew them to her was her ability to be able to demonstrate the critical skills, the transferable skills rather, that, and the reason I probably say critical because that's one of the main ones for me, but the transferable skills, and that's what we try to nail into each of you and drive you through that regiment if you were to stop and think about every assignment that we give you, you would be able to identify the transferable skills, particularly those individual skills dealing with ethics. And that's where we get back to APA and integrity. So I I want to just tell you we're trying to get you ready. And the thing that I wanted to say is that during the interview, the student had the interview and they told me it went well. But one of the things that they were so grateful for was my being dogmatic about citations in references. And it's very important. It's very, very, very important. I don't take it lightly. There are some professors who don't focus on it. A lot of content is good, but you have to give proper credit. And I also want to see that gray matter here, the critical skills analysis. So, okay, so I wanted to share that with you at the very beginning. All right. And then, of course, if you need me, you can always reach out to me. And I told you the best way to reach me is not email, but by texting and or calling my phone number. And a student learned that the other night by texting me, and I saw it later about 11 o'clock. They probably had text me about 10 that night, and I saw it about 11. And no, they text me about 10 something, and I think I saw it later than that. It was after 1 o'clock. And I responded back with another text. And the student let me know that apparently they were still up. So they text me back with another bit of information. And I called them and we had a conversation like at 2 in the morning, but that's because I was up. I happened to get up and recognize that there was a need. So anyway, that is what I wanted to say to you. All right, so let's get rolling with the assignments for this week. Okay, and let's share. Still getting accustomed to using this new system in terms of sharing. So let's go right to the calendar because I want to point out something to you very important about the calendar. There's a reason why I do the calendar every week, even though you have it, is that some students miss this, is that the 19th, which is today, and it tells you that the initial post is due tonight, tells you your lecture is going to take place. Then it tells you that the 23rd is when your next assignment is due. What's most interesting about this is your written assignments are due on the 24th. And actually, your live classroom, but the quiz, and the one written assignment. Notice this. You find out by Monday what's coming up for the week. Then you don't have any assignments from me for for Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. Okay. Some people will then sit and wait, and they will wait until Sunday evening to try to get their assignments done. That is not really good. Utilize these periods in between. You got quality time here. All right. Some students might say, well, I have other classes. That's still fine, but you still can allocate even 2 hours. If you did 2 for 6 hours here, you'd be ahead and preparing yourself so that when you get to the due date, you're not trying to throw it in and then you don't have last minute issues that take place. Just some advice to help you out there. So now you see that we come to the 9th of the month. Less than a month from now, this course will end. Now, reminding you that on the 2nd of November, that will be our last lecture, because in this class there is no week 6 lecture. All right. So you learned early on that this course is unique in that it has 3 chances for the quiz, no discussion post for week 1, and then finally no lecture for week 6. Okay. So the class actually ends on this date, not the 10th, the 11th, 12th, 13th, or the 14th, because actually the 10th is when term 2 starts. All right, that's all I wanted to say about the calendar there. Let's go back and let's take a look at the announcement. Okay, this was the announcement that I was talking about, the fall seminar, which is, was, as I said, you had 2 weeks, 2 last week, and then you had 1 today at 12:15. And like I said, I don't know if they were recorded or not, but there is something else that I'm going to be sending you. I just got it, and I'm going to pass that on to you about making an appointment with a librarian, but I'll add that a little later. So, announcement for this week: the roles of prisons, punishment, and programming. And you had chapters 4 and 14 of the text along with the PowerPoints. Someone asked me, why don't I lecture on the PowerPoints? The reason why is because of the fact that the PowerPoints is actually a summary of your textbook. And if you read your textbook that you're supposed to read these chapters, you're not supposed to use the PowerPoints in place of, but to supplement you. When I was in school, we had this thing called Cliff Notes, and Cliff Notes was a summary of the area that we were studying, and we didn't go back and reread the book, and we used that as an outline, so to speak, and that's the same thing you can use the PowerPoints for. And then you go over the activities, which I'll be talking about: institutional programming, changing philosophies, core rehabilitative programs, determinate and indeterminate sentencing activity. I'll let you do that. And then your vocabulary review. And again, it reminds you of the scheduled lecture, and it reminds you of the discussion assignment, state prison programming. And you already know the deadline for that is the initial post. Is due tonight, and then the reply post due Saturday. Then you finally have the written assignment, sentencing fact sheet, and then your quiz, which, as you already know, you had 3 times that you can get it in before the end of this Sunday coming up. Okay. So my motto, adversity is a springboard to success, is there. Again, I encourage you to take some time to listen to my story about the adversity that I went through. And the purpose for that is to encourage you and to help you to understand that you can be successful no matter what the challenges are. All right, let's get into the module itself. And so we're going to deal with the roles of prisons, punishment, and programming. I remind you again that the elements of corrections that we address, and we will address them each week, is the topic of either prisons, jails, probation, or parole, one or the other. Those are the topics that are underlying in corrections. Okay, and then I told you, if you keep in mind that the individuals that you're dealing with, keep the mindset, are individuals who have been caught committing crimes, or either they have pled guilty to committing crimes, which previously had been caught, but decided rather than to go for a trial, will do that. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but if you took criminal law, you'll discover that roughly 90% of the cases that actually come up end up getting settled by pleas or plea bargaining, which in the end sends an individual to either jail, prison, and probation. But if they go to jail, then of course, then you got parole, all right, as well. So I just wanted to remind you of that. Well, let's talk about, first of all, the assignments, get those out of the way before we get to the topics. So what is a sentencing fact sheet? The great question that many of my students see, and they begin to palpitate in their hearts and be concerned about what that really is. Well, to be honest with you, reducing it to the least thing is that all it really is a indication of the type of sentencing that you have. As I said earlier, there's only two types of sentences that states follow. No, and some have kind of a hybrid, but the overall thing is that the general breakdown is that, and you know what? I want to hook my headphones up. That's why it sounds funny to me. Okay, I know you can hear me. My headphones are now on. They should be on. Can you hear me through my headphones a little better? Okay, good. Yeah, yeah. I had unplugged them. Um, so now you could hear what I was talking about earlier because of the speakers on the computers, but it's much cleaner. So anyway, so it's important for you to understand that there's only determinate and indeterminate sentencing. And one of the things that most is very important for you to be aware of is that the state that you're in has one or the other. The one state that I know that has determinate sentencing for sure is because I participated in helping it become determinate sentencing when I was in law school. And guys, as you know, that's a long time ago. Illinois, after many years of being indeterminate sentencing, went to determinate sentencing by the introduction of a law called House Bill 1500. And in that, what we did was we took more of a determination into the structure of sentencing so that there could be more accurate sentencing. And it's been, and that was in 77. And now they have changed it. And what they did was they made it even better. So when you are sentenced, there are certain criteria that we utilize to determine what your sentence would be based on what we call aggregating factors of the crime that you committed, or um, we had mitigating circumstances. One of the most important mitigating circumstances is that you had never been in trouble before, or that the crime was not particularly heinous as well. So you can be rest assured that, and by the way, what we're talking about pretty much fits in the felony aspects, which pretty much goes to prisons as opposed to jails themselves. So that's why we're talking about it in this week's module. So what you're going to do is you're going to complete um, a sheet um, to indicate how both indeterminate and determinate sentencing operated. And so what's happening is that there's going to be um, a ballot prepared. And what you're doing is you're providing information kind of brochure or sheet so that gives the facts so that when a person votes, they'll understand what the sentencing is all about, and the pros and cons of each one. So that brings you to the instructions to create a one-page fact sheet that includes the definition of determinate and indeterminate sentencing, includes specific elements of determinate as well as indeterminate sentencing, explain two pros and two cons. There's a lot of them for each type of sentencing. And make sure above all, I already talked about this, but I have to say it again, credible sources. Professor, does that mean it's APA? Yes. Yes. Here's what I make sure that you understand that all written assignments should be APA formatted unless we state otherwise. And I can't recall too many that we don't. And important is this credible sources. I myself know quite a bit about the area. I teach it, taught it several years now, have worked within the system. I was never a correction officer, but what I did do was work with the system as a lawyer and a police officer, so much that I know how it worked. I took extensive classes as well to understand them. And so when I write something, I still provide sources to back up my statements. Not Professor Wright said, but that some journal said, some article said, some case said, or something along those lines. Okay. And the ideas should be, I don't have to say this, but I do it anyway, professional language, using correct spelling and grammar. And that goes with using credible sources, like never using Wikipedia and those kinds of things. And it tells you once again, says your course calendar, which we've already been over for due dates. And look at what it says. Save your assignment as a Microsoft Word document. Word document. Word document. And that's where I was talking about earlier. Okay. And then it tells you the rest in terms of that. All right. Now let's get to the rubric. Okay. So a question, let me see what that question was. Everybody can probably hear me. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me? Put that in there. Yeah, everybody can hear me. Something must be going on either with your audio because I'm looking at your mic is muted, but let me go back. Give me a minute. Let me see something. Gotta stop sharing for a minute so I can help you out here. Okay. You have to make sure that your audio is on and that you're not muted. Okay, I muted everybody so I couldn't hear you talking, but you still should be able to hear me. If you go up to audio video, it allows you to check your audio settings, speaker and microphone settings in your system. So you can see by looking at mine that, see that those lines moving, that means that I am able to be heard and the volume is up. So it automatically, but you got to make sure that your audio, and then I can even test it. You won't hear this, but, and I just played it myself, and then there's a microphone. Get rid of that. Okay. You can't hear when I'm hearing my voice in my own ears. So now Giovanni, uh okay, I see through headphones. It says your video conference is muted. Let's see. So your voice is muted. Maybe your headset or whatever you're listening on is muted. Okay. And I don't have the power to do that. Okay, let's go back to the chat. Can you hear me? Sorry about this. Everybody can hear me except Giovanni. Giovanni, can you hear me? I don't know what to do. So I don't want to keep you guys too long, okay, because we're at the halfway point where I want to get into the actual lecture of the topic. What you might have to do is go back and listen to the recording, but there's something, okay, I don't know what's going on there. Okay, so I got to share my screen again. Okay, share. Okay, so I got to go back to that. Okay, yeah, I don't know what's going on. It's something going on on Giovanni's, and I don't know what it is. Might need to talk to PSC. Okay, let me put in. Okay, Giovanni's left the meeting. Okay, so anyway, we're back to the point here is that make sure that you ignore these. This is A work, this is B work, this is C, D, and this is F work. Okay, so exemplary description of the sentencing type. okay, with credible sources. Exemplary list of the pros and cons with credible sources as well. And then your spelling and grammar. So it's very important. So any questions about this assignment? Any questions? You can type in the chat. I'll see it. Okay. Okay, good. All right. So you know what to do if you do have any. Okay. I apologize for having to take that time. I was trying to help that one student, but I did everything on this end that I could see that was possibly wrong. Okay. So now let's go to the discussion assignment. So you've been appointed as a board member and you assess the current status of your state's prison programming, your programming of the prison itself. So you're going to conduct an online search of your state's prison programming. Now, I'm not talking about sentencing now. I'm talking about the programming of your state prison. A short description of the types of prison programs and the goals of the programs, thoughts as to which programs are effective and why, including indicators and your recommendations. So that's for your initial post. In your reply post, respond to a student from another state uh, or to a student describing programs different than yours. By the way, you should include in your discussion initial post what state that you are using. Okay. All right, and that's I see already. Looking at Andrew, Andrew has already done a really good job there in terms of it. All right, so Andrew Wicks. So let's now leave that. Then the quiz goes without saying, it's a 30-minute quiz, and you know you have 3 times to do that. All right, so now with the time we have left, I want to talk about these topics in each of these sections as much as can. Now, here's something that I have talked about, but I'm going to remind you that our system um, is more program oriented than it than formerly, where it was more about punishment and less about programming. What did that mean? The key thing is that initially it was not toward any rehabilitation. The concept or idea was if you did the crime, you did the time, and that you would probably learn from your mistakes. It's like a timeout. That's the way prison was. More of a timeout than a place where you went to develop skills to turn you in another direction. Um, I have this philosophy I talk to students about in my other classes about this clock. I have a clock that I talk about, and the clock I talk about is, let's say you got in trouble at 12 o'clock. I'm not talking about the time of day. I'm just using it as an example. At the top of your clock um, is 12. At the right hand 45-degree angle is 3. At the 90-degree angle, I mean the one, I'm sorry, the 90-degree, and then at the 180 is 6. Okay, and then you go to 9, then you're right back where you started at 12. My idea is to take people from 12 o'clock and not get them to 3, but we move gradually to 3. Notice though, when you're at 3, you can see heading towards 6, and you can see where you came from 12. So the temptation is there still to go back or backslide into 12 o'clock while you're at 3 o'clock. In other words, to make some progress, but then to fall right back and go back to 12. Everybody understand what I'm saying so far? Whoops. That is not supposed to happen. Sorry about that. That is, I gotta turn that off. Okay. So that might have been one of your classmates, because it said Fargo, North Dakota. They tried to call me on the phone. But anyway, I usually have my phone on silent, but I guess because I started immediately here. But back to the point here is that everybody understand when I say you're at 3 o'clock that you can still see 12 o'clock. You get what I'm saying? You look, okay. So that means you can still see where you came from and you're moving towards. Well, the closer you get to 6, let's take you to 6. When you get to 6, you can no longer see 12. Because you're away, and 3 o'clock is okay because it started your transition and change. So at 6 o'clock, then you find yourself where you have reached the stage where you got all new stuff. You're in a stage where you are at the rehabilitation stage. That's why I tell people, the old saying, be careful what you say. Don't say to somebody, do a 180. I mean, do a 360. Do a 180. Because if you stop and do a turn away to a 180, you're facing a new direction. That's the key, a new direction. So that's the philosophy towards rehabilitation. And how do we do that? With various skills and techniques. As a matter of fact, you should be aware that it says here, it says America was shifting away from punishment to the penitentiary philosophy. The penitentiary philosophy was not rehabilitative in nature, but it isolated you and it wanted you to have reflection time. That's why the name of prisons were penitentiary. We don't use that anymore. You don't hear that anymore, but it means penitent. It means your time to reflect and to correct, and repent means to turn away from things. However, the point of the matter is you didn't address the problem that got the person there in the first place. So then we begin to move more towards 6, and it says this movement, the movement next, dealing with rehabilitation, emphasize education and training, which is going to take you farther away, because most people find themselves as convicted felons or convicted misdemeanor offenders because of the fact that either they don't have a, oh, can't do that. I thought I had turned that off. Oh, I know who that was. No, can't talk to this student. Forgive me, can't talk to you. I'm in a lecture. Okay, I don't know why that came up, because it's on silent. Oh, no, it wasn't. The ringer was. All right. Apologize again. So, emphasis on education and training. As I always say, knowledge is power. And it is important for us to recognize, it says that the inhumane treatment, the pendulum continues from that middle ground to the opposite side, with a realization that programming is important. That's my whole point in a nutshell. So you guys that are working as correction officers, are going to be working in correction facilities, understand that we want to help individuals with programming. So we've gone from this to that. And so what you do, you guys become counselors. You become social workers, case workers, and there to help. So you're not babysitting. So you're doing more than that. All right. So the research they talk about, I'm not going to talk about this evidence based practices, but what is quite clear is that we reached the stage where it is quite clear that, as it says here, that the staff who support evidence-based believe that change is possible and that punishment is not the role, but the goal is by the fact that because it speaks for itself. They're not a bad person. They just made a bad choice. Everybody with me in terms of that? So we begin to move to restorative justice. And with restorative justice, what we want to do is do what it says. The root word, restore. We want to get that person to the stage that they were before they got in trouble. Uh, and so it's going to take a combination of efforts from the offender to the community to even the victim. Did you not know that it the philosophy of restorative justice started in another country, Australia to be exact, and that but it's evolved to the point where it involves, as it says, the victim, the offender, and the community as they search for solutions to restore that individual um, and to get individuals to understand. I think that if you begin to stop and think about it and the overlapping of restorative being the heart of it and seeing that it hits community safety, uh, uh, competency development, and teaches accountability, you begin to see how this little glue begins to change what that individual was when they went through. And so we do things like we also teach to get individuals to understand how they would feel if they were in the situation that they put the victim in. But I also like to always say that victims are all over the place. The offender is a victim, as well as the person who is the target is also the victim. And overall, the community. As I get older, and I'm 71 now, is that I would prefer that we have someone coming out of prison who put themselves in a state where they are not going to be bitter and angry, or I'd put it this way, give them something that will help them, a tool like education or vocation to keep them from becoming what we call recidivists or repeat offenders. Everybody understand what I'm talking about here? Are we good here in terms of the philosophy that we have now? So we're more towards rehabilitation. I talk about it all the time. People says, Professor Wright, you're just one-sided. I says, you know why? Because of the fact that I understand that what is best for the overall community is rehabilitation. Okay. Any questions before we move on? Okay. All right. So now let's get down to core rehabilitative programs before we conclude with determinate and indeterminate sentencing. So how do they operate? rehabilitative programs come in various aspects to sitting in groups, um, deal with developing the cognitive skill abilities, um, education and vocational programs, substance abuse programs, sex offender programs. Now, in each of these approaches, you recognize what the key thing is to provide something to bring that person from 12 to 6 o'clock and to keep them at 6 o'clock. And you do it in a combination of group treatment, individual treatment. So when you're dealing with group treatment, you have individuals to sit around and talk about the things that cause them to get there, and to recognize that they all had one thing in common, is that they all made poor choices. Consequently, they ended up there. So what we want to do is we want to get them to recognize. One of the things that you have to recognize is, number one, that you made a mistake. You can't be repentant until you admit you made a mistake, and that you then want to go in a new direction. So we utilize these programs, and we're gonna talk about them, such as religious programs. I know well about that. As you know, I'm a pastor, and what we try to teach people is to develop a relationship with a power higher than them, and we call that God. You can call it whatever you want to, but what we have discovered is that individuals have programs that, if we get to the point of running them through and pointing out certain factors that we learn about those individuals, we have to get them to a point. So what we do is we categorize the individuals according to the risk, need, and responsivity, and that each person is judged differently. You're in a group, but every individual has a different issue that led them there. That's pretty much it. So then once we determine who, then we have to determine what they need. And that, again, is the next step. Okay. So we break them down to these issues that you see below. So the primary factors, or the big four, involves the history of that individual, you know, who they spend time with, what they know, what kind of attitudes did they develop about things. Um, and a lot of low self-esteem issues are involved. Their beliefs, um, and I go back to peer association, who you spend time with, and then your overall personality. These are the four factors that are involved with trying to understand each individual. And so what we then begin to deal with is the central eight, and that is education and employment. I talked about that earlier. The support that you have from your family, substance abuse. You know, and I know, that if a person has a substance abuse problem or a mental health problem, you could lock them up 20 years and let them out. And if you don't deal with that hardcore issue, get to the root of it, they're going to come back and do it. It's just like a person who's in the hospital who has an illness, and you just keep them there and rest them, but you don't do anything, provide medication that's necessary to help them get that body back up to speed. Well, it's the same kind of thing here. So I don't um, blame a lot of individuals who are junkies, who are addicts, for the crimes they commit, because of the fact that, yes, they're responsible, but we owe them to at least get them to get some help. Now, they also have a part, and that is you must admit you have problems. Otherwise, you self-destruct. I have said this teaching drugs and crimes, that individuals commit crimes to support their drug habits. And that consequently is why an important issue is for us to deal with the substance abuse. And then when you have individuals who have mental illnesses and substance abuse problems, that's like a double whammy. And so these are dangerous people to themselves and to others as well. So we deal with the leisure recreational approach. That's why they have athletics, they have gyms, um, and those kinds of things for individuals. So let's, before we leave this, again, remember we deal with the who, those who are the highest risk to recidivate. Recidivate means to repeat. What their needs are. We have to then program to address those needs, and that's how we do it. So it's who, what, and how. Very, very simple. All right. And then this gives some training here about it. This video, I don't know, there's some problem with it, I was told. So I don't know if you'll be able to get that. I'm going to try to see if they fixed it, but it doesn't look like it is fixed. No, it's not. So I don't know what they're going to do, but they're aware of it. So anyway, you put people in the group approach, as I said once. And so the idea is to uh, get a new mindset. That's what we were talking about. That's what I was talking about, coming from 6 to 12. That's my own little thing that I teach my students. Okay. All rehabilitative programming, whether it's sex offenders, substance abuse, education, focus on changing your thinking. That's the key in essence, and gives you cognitive skill building so that you can, in your mind, develop thought processes to take you in a new direction. Okay, very important. All right. That's why we don't just lock up and throw away the key anymore. So now let's talk about, well, this determinate indeterminate sentence activity. This is more of an activity, but I'm going to talk about a little bit about it. So you could start with clicking this, and here's the activity. Introduction to sentencing. So all the states and the federal government have some form of sentencing. And as I said, states have one or two, determinate or indeterminate. And all the whole issues and everything relate to that point. Everything. Okay. The goal is to accomplish the things that we just got through talking about. So now let's talk about the two different ones in the amount of time that we have left. So in the determinate sentencing, you're going to discover that the sentence itself, where the person participates in treatment to recidivate, are not considered as part of the releasing process. So here's my point. The determinate sentence says you commit X crime, you will do a range of 6 to 30 years. You're not going to do 5 years. You're not going to do 40 years. But whatever the judge sentences you to in between that period will be the time that you end up getting. Okay? Now, what that means is once you get to that, even if you really haven't, quote, rehabilitated, you're going to end up getting out. But what happens is that there is an attempt to fill those years that you are sentenced to prepare you to exit. So when do you start preparing an individual to exit? You prepare them to exit as soon as they are incarcerated. Okay, so people said, well, wait a minute. Under the determinate sentencing, um, you don't really have to be good. Well, the key thing is you want to do that because you don't want to become a recidivist. This gives the more time. So in that example I gave, let's say 6 to 30, let's say you were sentenced to 10. So you're going to do a formula based upon that 10 before you even qualify for early release. Okay, you're not going to be given less time under the determinate sentencing. Everybody kind of understand what I'm saying? In other words, you have a good idea of when, you know, when that person's coming out. Now, if that person, of course, do something like catch a case while they're in there or commit a crime, then that sentence that they had is still going to be the same, but then they'll have a new sentence, which oftentimes is consecutive as opposed to concurrent. And that they'll start that one afterwards. All right. So the punishment aspects of it support retribution. In other words, try to make you give back and to think about what you did. And it's set by the legislature. As I said, the sentence is given statutorily, and then the judge applies it based upon the offender's acts and their history. So you're automatically released on the established date, regardless of the risk and rehabilitative attempts. That's what I just said a few minutes ago. So it's in the best interest to start right away trying to help that person with determinate sentencing. States can easily calculate bed space because they know when a person's going to be released. States can monitor trends of crime because they know when that bed space is going to be needed. Now, here's the point. It doesn't prevent overcrowdedness, but what it really does is they have a good idea of when a person is going to be released. That's the key. And that person knows when they're going to be released. So some people say, well, then that person really doesn't have an impetus to be good while they're in there. I said, well, I disagree with that because of the fact that my grandmother taught me when you get some lemons, it's time to make some lemonade. Make the best out of the worst situation that you find yourself placed in. And that's what I'm talking about. So with determinate sentencing, like I said again, it's less in the hands of the judge. Okay, because it's already given how much time that person is going to get by the calculation of the math. Any questions about determinate before we wrap up by going over indeterminate? Any questions? Okay. It tells you determinate means it's able to you're able to determine. The last one is indeterminate. Now, indeterminate sentencing depends on how you've progressed with rehabilitation. Now, I always hear students say, well, wait, professor, doesn't determinate sentencing also take into effect rehabilitation? Yes, but it's not key to how soon they can be released. They've been a model prisoner, been good. They demonstrated that they accept responsibility or demonstrated some remorse for what they had done before. You can show that all day long in a determinate sentence, and you're still going to have the same, but it would be in your best interest to do that. So the release date is not determined. So it takes rehabilitation. So let's say you you can get out earlier and faster if you do well under the indeterminate sentencing, okay? Because the date of release for any offender is not known until it takes place. So you can't look at it and say, oh, I'm counting this number of days. No, what you then is say, well, I'm going to do better. Now, the reason why we don't like indeterminate sentencing in the system pretty much is that um, it puts it in the hands of people other than the legislators, the parole board, and the actual judge that sentenced you. But it takes it out of their hands to a point when it's determinate. So the release date is undetermined, so they don't know when the bed space is going to change there. Lies with the paroling board or authority in undeterminate and indeterminate. That's what I just said earlier. The other does not. So that's where the authority kicks in. Do you see the difference between the two? Everybody see the difference? Okay. All right. So the last thing that I just want to show you, because I'm about 3 minutes over, is there's a knowledge check for you to use as well. Keep in mind that when we talk about these topics in the lecture, I'm going to try to apply common sense applications to it, that when you read it, because you're going to read a lot of esoteric stuff, theories and all of that, I've tried to transfer those theories into the practical side from my experience as a criminal justice professional for those many years. So then this is just a test for yourself. So a determinate sentence is a sentence using sentencing guidelines. And you can type your answer there and then submit. A determinate sentencing is a blank utilizing the sentencing guidelines. So the guidelines are given to you. All right. So you can practice doing that. And you do the same thing for each of them, and then you hit submit. All right. So anyway, that is it. Sorry, like I said again, for these interruptions with that phone, and then also with other issues. Okay. So any questions? Okay. Any ideas? There's two that I have in mind. Yes, it is about that, but more specific. Hey, Lynn, do I have this written on my forehead? Because that's the answer. It's determinate sentencing. Yes, determinate sentencing. That's how you get your points. So give me that and you get it. One thing about, if you really pay close attention to the lectures that I do, whether you're listening to the recording or you're listening to me live, I give you clues throughout the whole lecture about what things that I'm going to use. And most of the time it's something that I will stress that my professional experience has provided to help you as a student to take you out of being, what is determinate sentencing? Well, and then I tell you what I know about it and why it was done, so the sentences are correct and taken out of the hands of the courts, and the legislature already previously sets it out. So it's not done, it's done on a case-by-case basis, but the parameters are set already. So very good, very good. So yeah, I did kind of tip my hand earlier, and that was the one. That was the one. So, all right, I'm going to say good night to you guys. Enjoy your week. Remember, quick question completed. Okay, let me see what that it says. Hold on a second. Let me get that again. Okay, try to ask your questions publicly. Don't ask them privately, because I'm going to mention them. No, can't do that. I can't do that. I give you one bite out of the apple in terms of it, so I can't do that. I can't um, um, give you, send it to me and then I review it. No, that's why I spend a whole lot of time. And I also have students to um, ask me questions before they complete their drafts themselves, before they complete their final one. So, have you talked to me before? Yeah, I know the answer to that is yes. So, no, I can't do it that way because um, actually I have too many students to do that with. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Okay. All right. Got it. Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult with anybody, but what I'm trying to do is be fair to everybody across the board. That's the way I try to operate. All right. Because grading to me is neutral. Um, to be honest with you, the formula for good grades is follow the rubric and the module. That's the answer in a nutshell. And then I elaborate on it. That's why I spend the earlier part of the sessions always going over that. I could skip that and go right into the material, but I did that before, and so many students then were like deer in the headlights. So I don't do that anymore. Okay, good night. See you next week. Enjoy the rest of your week. Get those assignments in, and I'll see you. Good night.